Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of The Committee Reads. I am your host KWCEs, and with me today I have GVR, Alex, and Birdman. And today we'll be going over KWCE number 27, the finale of Shin month, Ultraman Orb vs. Godzilla Shin by Birdman. Silence. It was the last thing you would expect the capital of Japan to be. It was not natural for a metropolis like Tokyo to be as silent as the Reaper itself. It was the new norm for the country's center of all operations after a terrible catastrophe. Its population, reduced in number after the incident, took extreme care in their day-to-day activities, respecting the entity that owned the capital. Tokyo was a city governed by fear, denied the chance to repair and grow in the wake of disaster, for its own protection, for it lived in the shadow of a fallen god, the Crimson Devil known as Godzilla. The creature's frozen body towered over districts and blocks, blotting out the sun as it cast a shadow of despair and terror across the land. Its motionless image was no less terrifying than those who had seen the destruction it had wrought firsthand. It was amazing how such a titan of impossible origins and power had been stopped by the brave people of Japan at the gravest of costs. The Goliath could not be moved in its delicate state, for the risk of awakening it was too great. There was no guarantee the same plan used to contain Godzilla would work again. Japan would have to live with this creature of nightmares, constantly living with the knowledge that, should it rouse from its hibernation, their own kind would be the source of their destruction. Summer had come to Japan, washing away the cool spring breeze and replacing it with unbearable heat. A thick haze coated the city as people struggled to keep cool, vehicles overheated, and incidents of heat strokes skyrocketed. Experts recorded it as the hottest summer on record. Despite the torturous weather, life in the metropolis continued to the best of its ability. After surviving the attack of a living colossus, they could endure the scorching season. They were unprepared, however, for the deadliest effects of the extreme weather. In the quarantine zone surrounding Godzilla, scientists and workmen quickly organized to complete the latest analysis of the imprisoned creature. For the past few days, the creature had shown small, growing signs of internal activity. The gathered experts conclude that the Titan was awakening due to the current heat wave, thawing the icy prison that was its own bloodstream. With each day up to the present, the activity had significantly increased, but the signs of a true awakening were not present. Fearing a mass panic and the threat of American nuclear retaliation, the Prime Minister kept all information restricted, choosing not to act unless the risk of Godzilla's return became a true threat. In the eyes of the government, there was nothing yet to fear. It started as a mild drizzle. Hot and exhausted workmen welcomed the unexpected shower with open arms. The falling liquid soaked into their clothes and gathered in crimson puddles as the workmen's Geiger counters went haywire. It wasn't rain. Workers and technicians scattered as the shower turned into a bombardment. Car-sized droplets of radioactive blood fell from the sky like meteors, flooding the containment area and leaving craters in the asphalt and concrete. Many unfortunate souls were crushed by the impact of the containment dews. From blocks away, horrific citizens watched as rivers of blood leaked from Godzilla's gaping maw, drizzling down its neck and dripping onto the ground below. The analysis had been wrong. Godzilla was closer to melting free than expected. Plans were quickly drafted to combat the rising disaster to be. The government had to act fast before the United States found out of their inability to contain Godzilla. The previous operation had stopped the atomic menace had required days of preparation and assistance from the nation that were now their greatest threat. With new predictions expecting Godzilla to awaken within hours, there was not enough time to prepare enough of the coagulant to refreeze the Titan. At best, they could delay its awakening until another plan could be attempted. It was hours later when CH-47 Chinook helicopters emerged from the horizon, hauling large tankers of coagulant underneath. Flanking the transport vehicles' assault, AH-1s and OH-1s prepared to defend the city if the operation failed. From their position, the gathered forces could see how far Godzilla's condition had worsened in the span of hours. Water and ice flowed down the crevices and wrinkles of its flesh. The trickle of blood had grown into a miniature waterfall, pouring radioactive fluids into the streets. The Leviathan's body pulsed with a blood-red glow as the platoon neared. The helicopters hovered in position meters above Godzilla. Cautiously, the tanks were lowered to the beast's head. From each side of the Chinook, soldiers equipped the hose descended with the tanks. If questioned, many of the men would struggle to deny any fear of the Crimson Leviathan before them. Its emotionless, blank eyes seemed to gaze into the soldiers' souls as they descended down. From the jaws to the tail, Godzilla's horrifying image seemed to be fashioned from the nightmares of Japan. Then it blinked. The soldiers hollered in horror as the creature's eyes swirled to address them. As the tanks reached its jaws, a strange sound echoed from within Godzilla's alien frame. The noise increased in volume, morphing into that of rushing water. Without warning, a torrent of blood erupted from the mutant lifeform's throat. It engulfed the tankers and their crew, cutting off their screams as they were washed away by the boiling radioactive fluid. As blood gushed from its maw, the Colossus started to move. Chunks of ice fell from its form as it flexed its muscles, bending its head to face the ground. The remains of the strange creature that formed from the creature's tail crumbled to pieces as the limb flexed and curled, acting as if it were its own organism. At the last of the remains fell away. The head-like growth at the tip of the tail opened its jaws, vomiting more streaming hot blood into the streets. The stream from the main head grew weaker as Godzilla's strange biology redirected the fluid to its tail. With it, the entirety of its upper half free of frost, Godzilla reared back to the sky as the last of the blood drained to its tail. Its horrible roar sounded, celebrating its freedom and marking the beginning of the end for Japan. Pass.
The helicopter regiment, stunned by the creature's awakening, were snapped back to reality by Godzilla's piercing roar. The Chinooks pulled away from the awakened giant as the AH-1Ss and the OH-1s unleashed their arsenal on the Leviathan's head. A barrage of bullets, rockets, and grenades blanketed Godzilla's head in a continuous volley of explosions, to no effect on the beast. Its freshly revived mind struggled to even understand what was happening to it. It could remember pieces of the metal animal's previous assaults, but what it could recall was information its limited intelligence could not process. All Godzilla understood was that it had to move. It had to locate where it had come here to find. It had to locate what it had come here to find. God, now is not the time for my voice to screw up.
Jesus, Birdman, you're giving them a stroke.
The creature took a single shaky step, shaking ice from its legs that lifted and crashed down on the pavement. Its other leg followed suit, removing most of the remaining ice from its lower body as it walked aimlessly through the city. The last of the contaminated blood drained from the beast's tail, and its jaws clamped shut as the limb thrashed and cracked to remove the final layer of frost. Continued to advance as the helicopters flanked around the Leviathan's head. Godzilla had little interest in the tiny machines. They were strange and alien to the mutated creature. Its sole goal was locating others like itself. It had to find another giant to spare itself from the curse of loneliness and find its purpose. On the hills outside the metropolis, lines of military vehicles gathered for combat. Lines of Type 10 tanks, Type 16 maneuver combat vehicles, M270 MLRSs, Type 99 155mm howitzers, and Type 96 multi-purpose missile systems rolled across the green hills and locked onto Godzilla's unmistakable form, while F-2 fighters and B-2 Spirit stealth bombers soared overhead. Godzilla paused, analyzing the amassing forces with interest and confusion. As its mind started to fully awaken from its slumber, the creature remembered their foul purpose and the agonizing pain they had brought. It could not allow it to happen again. It wanted to avoid the feeling of pain in all its forms. Across the Titan's body, the powerful glow emanating from its exposed flesh flared brightly. Immediately, the military legion started their attack as the event transpired. A blast of smoke and flame rolled across Godzilla's body, almost covering its massive form. Through the growing smog, however, a deep purple radiance appeared across the mutation's form. Its dorsal plates shone as bright as the sun as Godzilla's maw opened unnaturally wide. The ground squadron started to withdraw, continuing to fire upon the glowing behemoth as the aircraft dropped their payload across Godzilla's back. The hellish beast continued to gather its latent power despite the stinging onslaught, determined to protect its existence. From the depth of its throat, purple energies gathered as the lower jaw separated. The air around its jaws warped with heat as it bent low to the ground, spewing hot, black smoke across the maze of streets. The continued spraying protective membrane slid over its eyes as the smoke was replaced with scorching flames that flooded every inch of the megalopolis. Military vehicles that failed to reach higher ground were consumed by the surging blaze in an instant. As Godzilla unleashed its atomic rage, the flames began to coalesce into a narrow, concentrated stream of pure, purple atomic fire. Godzilla directed its gaze to the skies, taking out the jets and helicopters with chaotic sweeps of its atomic heat ray. As the burning remains fell, it turned its body to the distant foothills. Its photon beams sliced through the structures that impeded its progress and sending the remains crashing to the earth. It didn't matter how far or high the military reached. The atomic ray found in an Can I either pass or just take a quick break to get some water?
Oh, okay, alright.
I'll get back in a second. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, is it me?
I guess so, yeah.
Where did you get to?
It didn't matter how far or high the military reached.
It didn't matter how far or high the military reached. The atomic ray found and annihilated every vehicle in the vicinity. For miles around Godzilla, Tokyo was transformed into a replica of its first attack. After only a few minutes of use, the atomic ray began to lose its cohesion and return to its flamethrower-like state, leaving the remains of a metropolis in a firestorm before coming to a halt. Godzilla's eye membranes retracted as it stood motionless, exhausted but triumphant. Its safety was assured, and its mission would continue. From the scorched ruins, a new sound emerged. Godzilla tilted its head, searching for the source of the unusual sound. It was nothing like its own chaotic screech or the violent bangs of the tanks. It filled the destructive beast's soul with a warm, pleasant feeling. It was beautiful. A lone figure walked through the burnt remains of a once busy street. He held a harmonica-like item to his lips, creating the harmonica's melody that had entranced the radioactive giant. Godzilla leaned as low as it could, glancing at the tiny figure with curiosity. It looked like one of the small creatures that hatched from the metal animals, but something like its individual gave the gigantic creature an unusual feeling, making it wary to approach the seemingly unthreatening person. "I don't know if you can understand me," Kurenai Guy said to the creature. Despite being boxed away, his voice managed to be heard by a titan. "I don't know if you can understand what you've done, if you feel remorse for it, or if you even care for my words at all." He stored the Orbica away in the coat and tightened his fists. "What you have done, I cannot forgive. I want to show you mercy, but you've given me no reason to." He stared over into Godzilla's face, meeting its motionless orange with expressed determination. "For everyone and everything you've destroyed, I will mark your end." Godzilla had no understanding of the man's language, but the tone of the message indicated it was a threat towards the Crimson Leviathan, a tiny insect challenging the power of a created god. Godzilla screeched to the skies, accepting the human's challenge. The guy was no human. With a smirk, he pulled the orb ring from his jacket and thrust it out until he activated the device, engulfing himself in blinding light. "Ultraman-san! Ultraman! Tiga-san! Ultraman Tiga! I'm borrowing the power of your lights. Fusion up! Ultraman Orb Specium Superior. Pass."
GVR, do you want to take over again?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry about that. From the spot where Guy stood, a giant of light materialized. Rings of purple light discharged off his form as the figure solidified. Features of Ultraman and Ultraman Tiga were present on the Ultra's form, mixed in with his own unique traits. An O-shaped color timer shone brightly beneath a purple forehead crystal, and a pair of piercing light blue eyes. "I am Orb. I light the darkness and strike it." The warrior paused, sensing something was amiss. As he gazed upwards, he gasped in shock. The terrible titan, Godzilla, who stood 118 meters at his tallest, towered over the Ultraman. Orb stared up in horror as the Leviathan above him. Yet Godzilla's vile face held not the malice he was expecting. Instead, the giant shrieked in glee. It had found another giant to save itself from the curse of a purposeless existence. The red reptile stumbled forwards, awkwardly forcing its unbalanced form into a sprint to close the distance. Orb quickly reassumed his transformation stance as he began to grow, hoping to match Godzilla's height before the creature could meet him, but when Godzilla crashed into the warrior, he had only reached a height of 85 meters. The terrible Titan's skull slammed into Orb's chest at incredible speed with tremendous force, throwing the Ultraman back with a cry. His limbs flailed in the air as he smashed into a ruined skyscraper, bringing the demolished structure down around him. A rain of granite and glass bounced against Godzilla's hide as the demented lifeform strode towards his dazed adversary. His foot slammed down into Orb's gut, drawing a pained shout from the giant as its twisted nails dug into his flesh. Godzilla gazed blankly at the pinned warrior, expecting something to happen. This giant, despite its differences to its own imperfect form, was the only teacher that the Goliath possessed. Ever since it had first taken its steps onto the soil of Japan, Godzilla lacked the drive to accomplish anything than its own survival. But now it has another lifeform to observe and learn from. Learn what exactly? Godzilla's flawed intelligence did not know. But it would learn something, and use that knowledge to shape its own existence. It watched as Orb struggled beneath its colossal heel, struggling to lift the foot off. Godzilla needed the Ultra for its mission, and resistance would not be tolerated. It lifted its foot to smash the warrior again, but Orb brought up his arms in a cross, catching Godzilla's heavy, descending heel. He grunted in exertion, pushing his muscles to their limits to halt the mutation's attack. When that wasn't enough, he tapped into the power of his predecessors. The red markings on his body shone brightly and the forehead crystal flashed as he summoned the strength of Tiga's power type to push Godzilla's foot away. The Titan stumbled, catching itself with its articulated tail before resuming the assault. As its foot came down a third time, Ultraman's purple markings surged with Tiga's Sky Type's power, granting him the speed to roll out of the impact zone. The Ultraman stood tall as the thick limb crashed down and his legs swung out, catching Godzilla in the chest. Wheezing from the blow, the organism retreated, giving Orb further room to continue his assault. Chops and punches hammered the red giant's pectoral region, mocking its inability to defend itself with its miniature arms. However, Godzilla's muscular legs shot out, slamming its heel into Ultraman Orb's gut. The warrior shouted, stumbling back from the force of the strike. Hearing the sound of a moving rubble, he looked up as Godzilla's immense, snaking tail towered over the main creature. The long mass descended, but Orb was faster, backflipping to escape the demented limb as it smacked into the street. Once back on his feet, Orb tapped his hands to his chest. Summoning power to his hands, he spread them outwards, drawing a line of purple light. Unsure of the phenomenon, Godzilla watched as the warrior pulled his right arm back, summoning the arc of energy to his palm to form a spinning purple energy disk. Sparion Light Ring! With a strong swing, Ultraman Orb discharged the energetic buzzsaw at his titanic adversary. The reptile's immense mass gave the disc a larger target, and its scarred, weak flesh failed to stop it from cutting into its chest. Godzilla screeched as the saw dug through bone and tissue, cutting through the distorted creature in an instant and ripping out between the rows of dorsal plates. High-pressure jets of scalding blood shot out of the wounds, drenching the remains of the city in a boiling flood. For a moment, Orb lowered his defenses, surprised by the sheer fact that the reptile had not fallen after the surely lethal attack. Godzilla's tail snapped into action, whipping the ground and air as if it were its own unique entity. The Leviathan spun around, dragging its frenzied tail in an arc to strike the distracted giant. 92,000 tons of thrashing muscle missed Orb as the warrior jumped over the limb, closing the space and latching onto Godzilla's neck and upper jaw. It writhed in his grip, teeth snapping and tail slamming the ground as Ultraman Orb attempted to hold down the Scarlet Titan. Roaring in defiance, Godzilla's mandible snapped shut as the Warrior of Light slammed his knee into the base of the hyper-evolved creature's jaw. That's when he saw it. Crimson froth bubbled across the slash through Godzilla's torso as blood vessels constricted and tissue reached out. Before Orb's luminous eyes, a fleshy scab formed across the injury, sealing it shut. It wasn't regeneration in a sense, but Godzilla's bizarre biology evolving in a manner to treat the wound as a part of its anatomy. Beneath the knitted tissue, cells rapidly mutated to construct a new organ. In the brief moment of distraction, Orb's hold slackened, and Godzilla seized the opportunity. Dozens of crooked, needle-like teeth tightly clamped around the Ultraman's arm. Orb yelled out as the fangs dug against his skin, unable to penetrate but determined to bring him agony. Snapping its head, Godzilla removed Orb from his body, tossing the ancient warrior across the streets. Ultraman Orb hit the tarmac rolling, tumbling out of his control before exiting into a crouch. Standing erect, Godzilla's blank stare fell across Orb's area. Its miniature fingers lazily twitched as it stood motionless, seemingly awaiting something. Even with its back and dorsal spines facing away from the Ultra Warrior, Orb could still see the rapid buildup of photonic energy through the creature's glowing sternum. The mutant's signature crimson radiance transitioned to a vibrant, shining purple, its lower jaw splitting in two to show the lustrous light within Godzilla's throat. Time was short for Orb's response. He thrust his left hand up, generating a ring of purple light before him. Thrusting his right arm out to the side, a cross materialized in its center as it contracted into an orb, granting Ultraman Orb the required energy for his attack. Spirion Ray! The Warrior of Light's hands assembled into a cross, surrounded by a luminous ring of light, as a dazzling blue ray, wrapped in flowing spirals, shot forth from his hands. Same moment, Godzilla's focused atomic beam fired, colliding with the equally vibrant ray. A brief flare filled the battlefield as the two energy sets met, fighting and failing to overcome the other. Such high amounts of power could not reach an eternal stalemate, and both beams eventually exploded, throwing their owners back with the resulting shockwave. Orb was thrown to the earth, but Godzilla's flexible, sturdy tail kept the atomic nightmare upright. Clutching his head, Orb climbed up from the rubble and shook the dizziness from his mind. Not far away, the eerie crackle of Godzilla's building atomic lust ominously filled the air. Ultraman's head snapped up as the Crimson God's jaws parted, spewing violet fire. With seconds to react, he jumped upwards and escaping the crackling lasers that ripped apart the street he once stood on. Shining light engulfed his form, attracting Godzilla's gaze as his form was lost under a radiant aura. Also, narrowing escaping.
Whoops.
Damn.
This match sucks now. How could you do this?
0 out of 10.
Damn.
Shining light engulfed his form, attracting Godzilla's gaze as his form was lost under a radiant aura. 7-San, Ultra 7. 0-San, Ultraman 0. I'm borrowing the power of father and son. Fusion up, Ultraman Orb, a Merium Slugger. I become the light with wisdom and courage. Pass.
Okay, you suck.
What?
You stole the lines I wanted to read.
No.
Sure. The aura around the orb dissipated, revealing his new form to his unnatural energy. Gone were the patterns of red and purple, replaced with the entire sections of red, blue, black, and blue. Large metallic protectors adorned his chest and shoulders, gleaming in the sunlight. His eyes had taken on a sharp triangular appearance, and on top of his forehead rested 3 sharp-bladed crests. Pass. Yep, that's all I'm feeling today.
Gosh.
Gotta get going.
Gosh, sorry.
Godzilla was not astounded by the giant's chances for long, sending another scorching photon stream towards the airborne fighter. Orb's hands shot to his head, fingers touching the center crest before throwing them forth, removing the blade and launching it at the incoming atomic fire. The ice slugger slammed into the ray, pushing through the incalculably hot plasma without resistance. It pushed Godzilla's atomic ray to its source, breaking through the stream and slamming into the monster's head. The Titan's skull snapped back, cutting off the ultra-atomic ray. As the spinning ice slugger returned to the now descending orb, once his soles touched the ground, his hands tapped the 2 smaller sluggers before thrusting forwards. From the blade's glowing projection shot out, slashing past the armored hero's hands as the ice slugger turned to its grip. The larger, heavier Godzilla could only watch as the orb sluggers locked onto its unmistakable bulk. The constructs ripped into its flesh, tearing straight through muscles, tendons, and bones from before exiting, driving hollows, indescribable agony from its twisted mouth. After the first cuts, the sluggers came around again, slashing and striking the reptilian over and over. Ultraman Orb charged forwards, brandishing his ice slugger before him and swinging at the distracted leviathans. Steaming fluid sprayed as a diagonal tear was carved into Godzilla's chest, earning another tormented screech from the wretched creature. Orb continued his assault, slashing away at Godzilla's front as the orb sluggers ripped away at its sides and back, launching showers of ichor and gore hot. Charging the blade with his power, the Ultra Hero delivered an energized slash across the nuclear monstrosity, driving Godzilla back as it allowed. Stepping back, Orb held out the ice slugger, imparting power into the weapon and releasing it, leaving the blade floating in place as the Orb slugger constructs came to spin above Orb himself. Hyper Ultra Knock Tactics.
That's why I didn't give you those lines, because I knew you'd do this.
Oh, you know me too well. Oh, I'm sorry if I make fun of your silly giant man, Kino. His joined hand swung out, briefly flashing as the 3 sluggers shot forth at their target. Godzilla was assaulted from all sides by the churning blades, crying in agony and frustration as they cut through its unprotected hide repeatedly. Its tail lashed out, attempting to take out the circling blades, only to receive their punishment as well. The gargantuan reptile fell to a knee, unable to take the tremendous torch turned upon it. With the damaged the sluggers returned to their master, the constructs re-entering the true orb sluggers while Orb reattached the ice slugger itself. His fingers shot to the forehead crystal cabinet before pulling away, his left arm resting across his chest as emerald particles were drawn to the glowing feature. Triple and Miriam Ray. Giggity.
How dare you have fun?
I
You
know, right?
bastard.
His left hand was pulled to his side as his right fist lashed forward, highlighting Godzilla as the target as a spiraling emerald beam fired from the crystal. It struck the weakened nightmare of evolution, pushing it back for several seconds as it cried out before bursting through the giant's chest. A gigantic hole described the remains of the terrible beast's chest as the laser punched through with minimal effort. Godzilla stumbled forward, groaning slightly as it attempted to fight against the growing fatigue. Before slumping over, the crimson illumination faded from its unmoving form. Orb's arms dropped as he cautiously analyzed the unmoving titan. He expected more spectacular reaction, but that wasn't the case. Although an easy victory was preferred, something in the Ultra Warrior's gut cautioned him from dropping his ground. Pass.
Dropping the guard. Alright.
Pay attention.
As he slowly approached, the reptilian's crimson hue reignited, flaring brightly across its entire body. Its eyes opened and Orb jumped back as its head lifted, jaws opening wide as its horrifying screech came forth. The cuts across its body were invaded by fibrous tissues, transforming like the chest wound had. From each scab, a bizarre orifice appeared. As Orb watched, the center scab pulsed and churned, tissues bulging as something pressed against it from underneath. The flesh was torn away, tossed from Godzilla's torso as the new organ settled into place. It was like a cut cavern of meat, a gaping hole in the center of the monolith's body that was lined with rows of warped teeth. It was a second mouth, contracting and expanding as it let out inhuman growls. The purple brilliance manifested once more. Godzilla's jaws split apart as the bright grow coursed. Was that English right there? The bright grow?
Supposed to be glow.
Gosh darn it.
Well, look at Birdman. He fucked up.
Look at that, he forgot to do his job.
I know.
Yeah,
that
we both fucked up.
yeah.
And GBR fucked up too by not pointing it out.
How is this my fault? Why am I getting roped into this?
Because you didn't point it out when you did your review.
Oh, like from way back when, right?
How dare you not catch this, 2 years ago?
Yeah, how dare you?
The bright glow coursed through his dorsal fins. The product was fired from its jaws, but it was not atomic death. A stream of black steam. Okay. Steam was launched, taking Orb by surprise as he was blinded by the assault. Godzilla's secondary jaws expanded, violet energy gathering in its core. Through the smog, Orb saw the intense light growing. Wait, is that supposed to be glowing? What the heck is going on here? What in the world? Okay. Embraced himself. Oh, wait, like growing. Oh, I guess
Birdman knows all these fancy words, but he doesn't understand a simple one like glow.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be light growing, because it's like getting more intense.
Getting more intense. Yeah. No, that one finally makes sense. The other one, though, I'd argue could have been glow, but whatever. Embraced himself. His arms...
I mean, Kaiju, I could probably find typos in your matches.
Oh, absolutely. No. Oh, I know there are going to be typos in my matches.
There's typos in everyone's matches.
Yeah.
His arms came up to guard his torso as an enormous atomic beam, larger than its forebears, exploded from the fanged cavern, piercing the black cloud and striking the red and blue giant. White-hot pain engulfed Ultraman Orb's arms as he was pushed back. but kept his guard to save the rest of his body from the beam's ravages. Purple fire washed over his form, scorching his armor-like skin. Unlike the oral beam, the chest stream could not keep its cohesion for long. It flickered and sparked, dying away as the atomic energy was redirected elsewhere. Orb almost collapsed, unbearable pain filling every pore of his form. He had fallen. The follow-up would have been even more devastating. From the vents across Godzilla's front, dozens of atomic rays spat forth, unleashing a rain of violent violence upon the wounded hero. Flames and sparks erupted around and across Orb as he was caught in the center of the photon storm, crying in agony. Ultraman Orb fell to a knee, breathing heavily. His color timer began to blink red, alerting the warrior to the precious little time his injured body had. The stoic Godzilla watched him with interest, drinking in the information of the situation. It knew it should be dead. It should have died the moment that first disc cut through its body. When it did not, Godzilla was suspicious. When the laser drilled a cavern through its chest, it began to understand. It could not die. It could take on whatever was thrown at it and adapt to counter. No, defeat it. It could endure punishment of 1,000 years and emerge the superior organism. There was nothing else on this planet that could compare to its unique, terrifying, evolving biology. It had found its purpose, its mission in existence. It knew that it would learn something from the warrior of light, and it had. It had taught Godzilla the art of destruction. Orb weakly raised his head to meet Godzilla's stare. Though his thoughts were dazed by pain consuming his body, he recognized the emotions now displaying in the mutilated reptile's orbs. Malice and confidence practically oozed off the Leviathan as it stared silently at the wounded warrior. The beast now had a purpose, a reason to exist in its lonely world. But that purpose was just the destruction of everything that Orb sought to protect. Suddenly, the pain gripping his body didn't matter as he managed to stand to his full height. "So you finally found a reason to exist?" Orb asked the crimson entity. Godzilla did not reply. "This is what you want to dedicate your life towards? Pointless death and terror? Is this the legacy you want to be remembered by?" Godzilla screeched in amusement. Legacy? The Ultra dared to imply that it would fall. That was impossible. It was immortal, untouchable. Their battle had proven this. It would never die, and its mission would not be altered. The ignorance of the reptile made Orb clench his fists. "So you think you think yourself invincible now? Well then." He raised his hand, pointing directly at the nightmare in the challenge. "I'll just have to beat the reality into you." Godzilla's head snapped down in rage. His horrible maw opened to emit a roar of utter fury as the luminous aura around from before consumed Ultraman Orb. "Zophy-san! Zophy! Belial-san! Ultraman Belial! I'm borrowing the power of light and darkness. Fusion up! Ultraman Orb! Thunder... Breastar? Breastar.
That name is correct. I'm telling you, that is the correct name.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's Breastar.
No, it's Police Star.
No.
I'm just...
Let him have his dream. He needs this.
The light faded to reveal a form of darkness. Black and red patterns adorned the entirety of Orb's muscular body. His enlarged shoulders sported a row of metallic protrusions, a sign of rank inherited from Zophy. His fingers ended in sharp claws. His eyes had taken on an orange, jagged shapes. "I embraced the darkness so I could become the light!" Godzilla backpedaled in alarm as Orb spread his arms, unleashing a berserk roar into the air as his crimson markings flared brightly. Like a raging bull, he charged towards the towering devil, sending the streets flying hundreds of meters up with every thundering step. Purple luminance flared up as Godzilla's chest cavity opened, expelling its powerful attack at the Ultra. "Thunder across guard!" Crimson lightning coursed through Orb's arms as he brought them up into an X, catching Godzilla's atomic ray. The barrier sparked wildly, refusing to let the atomic energies pass as Orb continued to sprint undeterred. Godzilla refused to back down, continuing to fire its beautiful wave of destruction until, with a bestial cry, Ultraman Orb ripped the beam apart with his bare hands. He leapt at the confused Titan, slamming all 50,000 tons of himself upon Godzilla before he could understand the situation, and sending the two of them crashing to the skyscraper's burnt husk. Pass.
Give me a second. As the black and rubble rained down, Orb's fists hammered against the mutation's chest and skull over and over, augmenting his strikes with his burning hate for the destructive monstrosity. Bones cracked and blood and teeth flew from Godzilla's jaws as it helplessly endured the assault. Relief came when Orb struck the beast's chest, forgetting in his rage the secondary mouth now located there. The cavern opened, allowing his hand to plunge into its depths before snapping shut. The cries of an enraged Ultra filled the empty metropolis as rows of teeth clamped onto his arm. Smashing his free hand against the maw, he tried to pull it free, but the cavern of fangs held on tight. His free hand pressed against the beast's grotesque chest, clawed fingers sinking into its flesh for leverage as he pulled once again. The maw refused, but with a disgusting tearing sound, Orb ripped his arm free. Godzilla's chest orifice was almost pulled inside out as the Dark Warrior's limb pulled, raising high above his head. Through the glare of the sun, Godzilla witnessed a spiked hail of blood-red energy materialize in Ultraman Orb's palm, with a flash of crackling crimson. The deformed ancient could not resist as the Ultraman drove the spinning weapon into its mutilated jaws. Piercing screams echoed as its chest was ripped apart. Scalding blood and irradiated flesh spat high into the air as Orb brutally carved into the helpless reptile. But no matter how deep he dug into the creature, Orb could not locate anything that resembled organs of any kind. It didn't make sense. How could anything this large and complex function without some kind of organ systems? He continued to tear apart the nightmarish organism's torso. His only plan at this point was just to rip the damn thing to pieces. Before he could accomplish that goal, something snapped down on his left shoulder. Orb grunted, pain and fury surging through his body simultaneously as he looked at his attacker. Godzilla's third maw, located at the base of its tail, clamped onto the Giant of Light's hide. The entire limb flexed, dragging Ultraman Orb off the creature's main body. With its tail's assistance, Godzilla pushed its ravaged form up. Disgusting fluids drained down his body from its gaping sternum as it strode towards its recovering enemy. Orb pulled himself to his feet, fists clenched to strike out, but Godzilla turned its colossal shape, swiping the warrior's head with its serpent-like tail. Hitting the scorched tarmac once more, Orb tried to quickly recover, but the titanic deformity's foot smashed into his ribs, throwing him aside like nothing than a pebble. He landed on his back, staring up at the Crimson God as its minuscule eyes peered back with an aura of superiority. Godzilla's jaws lunged down at Orb's vulnerable body. The Black Ultra raised an arm in defense, giving the vicious creature a target to strike. Its crooked teeth grasped the limb, driving a cry from the Ultra hero, before it pulled back, dragging Orb to his feet. Before the atomic demon could start another attack, Ultraman Orb smashed his free fist against the reptile's face. It stumbled but remained erect, only for more strike to rain upon its head as the berserk giant sought to free his trapped arm. Blow after blow ravaged the nightmare, its only option to submit as the fusion warrior's assault grew intense. Oblivious to the increasing pitch of his color timer, Orb felt the tail maw fire an atomic beam upon his exposed back. The limb attempted to drive the warrior away from his assault, but his clawed hand clasped the bizarre jaws. Driving the strength he still possessed to his trapped arm, he finally ripped it from Godzilla's mouth with a shower of fangs. With both hands, Orb held the end of the nuclear beast's tail and started to spin. Godzilla's massive nails dug uselessly into the ground as it was dragged around the city. Its tail fired again, purple fire missing the ancient hero entirely and shooting over Ultraman Orb's shoulder. Then the impossible happened. After several more swings, Godzilla's feet left the earth. The dark power surging through Orb's body allowed him to accomplish the unbelievable and hurl the 92,000-ton behemoth. Godzilla struck the ruins of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government building and vanished into the structure's shell. The beast's distinctive maple leaf spines and thrashing tail were the only evidence of its presence as it struggled to break free. Sprinting towards the trapped entity, Orb dove over its squirming tail, rolling into the landing and reaching out as he landed on his feet. The black talons of one hand sank into the base of Godzilla's tail, restraining the uncontrollable appendage. With his free hand, Orb summoned the Zedsium light ring once more and brought the cutting construct down. Ichor and blood sprayed in all directions as Godzilla tore its head free from the debris to scream in unspeakable torment. The stump of the mixotrophic creature's tail erupted its internal fluids like a raging volcano, before his body began to act to control the blood loss. Ultraman Orb pulled back, Godzilla's severed tail still squirming in his grasp. As the flow of blood began to lessen, the Titan ripped itself from the government building's remains. Purple light pulsed through its systems once more as, within warning, an entire barrage of photon-based heat rays erupted from between its rows of dorsal fins. Caught off guard, Orb raised the severed tail to take the volley. More than a dozen purple beams struck simultaneously, digging into Godzilla's tail with ease and tearing the limb apart to reach Orb behind. Although the Ultra's hide was far more resilient, the scorching heat was quick to take its toll on the warrior. He tried to hold ground, but the combined force of the fire ray barrage drove him back. Several seconds passed before the heat rays began to die, reverting to flickering red flame streams before fading completely. Turning to face its rival, Godzilla was disappointed to discover Orb was still alive. The god incarnate stared at its enemy with narrowed eyes. It had to kill him. He had taught it everything it required to survive. He had no other use for it. Godzilla stared again, looking over Ultraman Orb's muscular, humanoid shape. Or maybe he did. Oh my. Pushing up from the rubble, Orb faced the nightmare of Japan once more. With his energy running low, the pressure was on to end this now. Bright light sparked from his color timer as he brought his hands together, generating dark energies in his right and light energies in his left. He pulled them apart, the two sets of power surging against each other as a ring of white and crimson lightning grew before the giant. At last, the power was fully taken into his hands, holding them ready for release. Dead Seam Ray! The Ultra all but screamed the words as he put his hands together in a cross. A bluish-white beam coated with spiraling bolts of ebony and crimson surged from his upright hand to Godzilla's ravaged sternum, pushing the mutilated mutation back into the ravaged structure behind it. White-hot energy and agony engulfed the devil of monsters as blackened debris fell around it. From its savage front, a colossal explosion of purple and black erupted. He completely consumed Godzilla and its surroundings, purging the landscape of its presence. With his stamina drained, Orb collapsed. Propping himself on a knee, the Black Titan gasped for air as he recovered his energy. It had taken its toll on the warrior's body in the city, but the legendary Giant of Light was victorious. Godzilla's foul existence was surely purged from the planet he had grown to love. The soil shuddered slightly, shaking the remains of Tokyo's buildings free of loose debris. Ultraman Orb felt the tremor rumble through his body as a second followed. For a second, his fatigue disappeared as his head snapped up in disbelief. From the blazing remains of the Metropolitan Government building, a cursed silhouette moved closer. Flesh was stripped and bone was scorched, but Godzilla still marched towards its weakened quarry. He walked through the bones of Japan's capital with the confidence of a king, unfazed by its wrecked figure. As it strode closer, its dorsal fins began to shake and quiver, spitting blood from their bases like water sprinklers. One by one, they fell from the crimson reptile, rolling down its back and shattering on the earth. Godzilla's body continued to change and adapt as Orb watched on with horrified curiosity. With a spine dropped like scabs, its legs became slimmer and straighter, losing their reptilian appearance as the excess mass was transferred to Godzilla's healing torso. Its spiky protrusion was gone and muscle and skin was engulfing its chest, as its arms lengthened and bulged. Its hands creaked and snapped, spitting tiny red geysers as its bones were reconstructed into human-like appendages. Godzilla's head was affected by the rapid evolution too, becoming narrower and taller as its jaws shrank and his eyes expanded. Finally dawned on Orb to what it was doing. To combat obstacles, it evolved to overcome them. This was what it was attempting to do. It was replicating his body, taking on a form better suited for physical combat. If it completed its transformation, it would become almost impossible to stop. Pass.
You can't win. I won't let you win. Guy fought to get out the words in his drained state. My actions created you. It's my duty to stop you. Although he seemingly lacked the strength, Ultraman Orb stood tall, meeting the mutating life form eye to eye. I'll fight for the future of this planet and its people. For the lives of those I care and love. He pointed at Godzilla, his body overtaken by light once more. And I won't see that future ruined by you. Mebius-san, Ultraman Mebius. Ginga-san, Ultraman Ginga. I'm borrowing the infinite light of the future. Fusion up, Ultraman Orb, Mebium especially. Patterns of red and gold highlighted grey and silver. Across the Ultra's breast, arms and forehead, sighing, pointed crystals shone brightly. Godzilla's eyes widened, sensing a new form of latent power. I'll show you the dazzling light of the future. Ultraman Orb spread its arms to his sides as white light flashed at his back. From the flare, 5 prismatic crystalline swords materialized, hovering like drones around the giant of light. The center sword of formation floated to Orb's hands as he raised it to the heavens, calling the other blades forth. The 4 weapons spread around one in his grasp. A multi-hued laser shot from the tip of each, extending far into the heavens. In Orb's grip, a sword forged of light stood ready to strike. The atomic energy was already diverting to Godzilla's ball while it was still usable. The confidence in immortality was starting to wane at the sight of the awesome blade. It had to stop this. It had to prevent this. Maybe especially Blade. With all he had, Orb swung the sword downwards. At the exact same moment, Godzilla's shrinking jaws opened, but it was too late. The scorching blade cut through the atomic figure in an instant, leaving a glowing line down its body from head to groin. The beast was motionless, frozen in position, but there was no life in its eyes. Seconds felt like hours as they ticked by, before the behemoth began to move. The giant's two halves fell in opposite directions, spitting bolts of energy from their forms before impacting the earth. A colossal fireball engulfed the deceased Godzilla, annihilating every cell and fibre of its being. Everything burned, ensuring the demon would not return. The reign of Godzilla was at an end. With flashes of light, the source dematerialized. Seconds later, the same light engulfed the orb as he failed to rid away, dispersing into glowing particles. Gray-eyed guy hit the pavement, catching himself with a knee as he struggled with a heavy toll upon his body. He wanted to move, but every fibre of his form screamed for rest. He lay there for several minutes, ignorant of the radiological contamination no doubt caked in the street as he recovered his energy. Guy examined his surroundings, noting the ravaged and scorched buildings once home to people. He had seen the destruction Godzilla had caused in his first attack second-hand, and seeing it recreated before him worsened the rage sorrow within him. But it could have been so much worse. Japan had gone through such events in the past and kept going. The city and nation would recover in time, and its people would live to see the sun rise another day. That was enough of a victory for him. Guy looked away from the ruins, started a long trek back to the civilized areas of refugee camps no doubt set up. After today's devastating events, he needed a drink and bite to eat. As he walked away, he failed to notice the drone hovering behind him, recording the lone wanderer. Pass.
Alex.
Amazing, exceptional, outstanding. You truly are an inspiration to the next generation, Guy-san.
Far away from previous action, a man excitedly praised Ultraman Orb's efforts from his rooftop view with an energy more fitting of a child. So serious, so efficient, and oh so noble. Some people can learn from watching a true Ultraman in action. The man rambled to himself as he straightened the collar of his crisp white business suit and cracked his pink tie as he turned to the side as another drone identical to the one observing Guy descending onto the roof.
Time crystal successfully recovered. Crystal forging experiment 100% success.
The drone's cheerful female voice exclaimed as a small disc-like object was lowered from its underside and into the man's waiting palm. He held the object up to the light, examining it with the excitement of a child with a new toy.
Ooh, this is excellent.
Now I get all the new crystals to play with, he giggled. Plus, this one is a far more exotic replacement for plain old Mecha Gomora. The crystal in question was circular in nature, small enough to easily fit in a person's hand. With a clear raised border, the haunting fact about the item was the image located on its center. Foreign blaze behind the kanji symbol for advance was the crimson snarling form of Shin Godzilla. It was I responsible for this miracle of science. It was I who tamed the power of the monsters. It was I, Mikado Aizen. Nagoda sat at the lone table he had prepared and opened the briefcase atop it. Within it was a strange container bearing 11 slots large enough to hold a crystal like the one in the madman's hand. Some of the slots had already filled with other crystals, each one bearing a unique Kaiju element. The remaining empty slots were arranged in the shape of cross, positioned with another crystal at center. Nagoda inserted the Shin Godzilla crystal to the top slot of the cross as a sinister smile formed on his lips, flashing with his innocent appearance as he admired his handiwork. The element of flame has been acquired, but who shall fill the places of the remaining three? He cupped his ears, listening out as to receive an answer as he continued to ramble on in his delusion. Who will rise up and offer themselves? Who will generously loan their power to me? The eccentric man's fingers traced the crystal at the top of the container, unlike the others. A strange fleshy growth had consumed its barrier, giving it a corrupted appearance, but the image at the center was not a kaiju like the others. It was the image of the warrior that Japan had just seen save their country from God incarnate. Ultraman Orb. It won't be long now, Orb-san, Kodo said as he picked up the crystal and began to polish it. Before I'm borrowing the power of your bonds. Winner Ultraman Orb.
Alright.
The sad part is the high-pitched voice you do, Alex, would have fit that guy perfectly.
Yeah.
You really would.
Or I should say, winner Birdman's favorite of the two.
But he's not wrong.
So you do have a favorite child, anyway. Nevertheless, though, this was a really... Oh, man, this one's really... I thought the humanoid form did a little more near the end. I don't know what I was misremembering there, but then again, my dyslexia kicked in hard and was like, oh, nope. But I think this one's a really... This is a really good match to send this month off on. It's definitely... Like, I think the only real weakness I can think of is the establishing element for Orb. It feels just kind of like, oh, he's here now. Don't get me wrong, I think the twist at the end infers... How should I put this? What I got out of it was... This is the Shin Godzilla events in the Ultraman Orb universe, is the impression I got. Because, again, you don't really get a whole lot of focus on, like, the characters in Shin Godzilla that were responsible for doing this. It just simply happened. So I have a feeling this match could be a lot more appreciated if you were already, like, you know, if you're familiar with Orb, if you're, you know, like, know of Orb's, his whole deal. This is very much Orb's here to save the day for this terrifying creature. With that said, I really enjoyed the fight. Absolutely loved Shin Godzilla's awakening. Like, my gosh, that's a terrifying mental visual right there. Between the melting ice and the gushing waterfall of blood. That's fantastic. And then, yeah, the fight... I think the two trade some really interesting blows, and then Shin Godzilla adapts appropriately. I like the fact that, in a sense, Orb indirectly teaches Shin Godzilla what he, like, needs. And I think that's really interesting. So, yeah, an all-around really fascinating match. Maybe a couple of glows instead of grows, but whatever. I really like this match a lot. So, maybe not as much as, like, you know, maybe some of you guys in here, but I still really, really liked it. Alright, GVR, what'd you think of it?
This is one of my favorite KWCEs. I'm not sure if it is my favorite, but this is definitely up there, without a doubt. Yeah, it's very well written. Loved the mental imagery of, like, you know, Shin Godzilla's awakening, and the action was very well done. And you're right, this match is a bit better when you're familiar with Orb and Ultraman in general. Because it's just like, you know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I really enjoyed Shin Godzilla's characterization here, how he started off confused and lost, and then, like, slowly started to acclimate to the character most people write him as, which is God Complex Destroyer. But it's done well in this match. Because it makes sense. And yeah, I liked the way Orb was characterized too. Just all around real good stuff. I look forward to seeing if this gets a sequel or not.
Alright. Alex, what'd you think of it?
I thought it was pretty good. Really solid match. Really thought the fight sequences were good, and yeah, I think you'll probably appreciate it more if you're more familiar with Ultraman Orb in the franchise in general. But even as someone who's not familiar with it, I thought it was pretty good.
All right. Birdman, what can you tell us about this match? What can you, like, the history of the match and all that fun stuff?
Okay, I'm struggling to remember now. It's so back. This one, I can't recall if I played it before or after he did Nice Bit of September. Could have been the latter, but I'm going to say confidently. This one went through a lot of revisions regarding the plot. It went through several drafts, but again, the one I had. Like, it had different... I used different forms of Orb, it had different plots. It took a while to come up with one I liked that worked. I had fun. I had fun coming off the battles with the Awakening. That was a fun one to write. When I KWCEs, it was a pretty creepy image I had to come up with my head. Are you glad to know, GVR, there are sequels in the works, so it's been lazily getting to them.
I know the feeling.
But yeah, this is one of my fun ones I had to write, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
So, yeah, I do remember one thing in this match in particular, that there was a very different word used to describe one of Godzilla's orifices, and I was like, no.
I know you want to think of, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, no!
Yeah, when Shin gets cut up by the sluggers and he's growing a bunch of new mouths, the original version of the match uses anuses to describe what they look like.
Yeah! I was like, no! It's like, I knew if I kept that in there, man, I would get memed for days. But it also shows that it's like, yes, I do check these over. However, 2018 me may not have done as good of a job, but hey, at least he noticed that. I will give him credit for that.
You cared enough to censor Birdman's vision. But...
How dare I? But yeah. Nevertheless, though, yeah, no, really good match. Congratulations, man. I look forward to seeing the others and all that fun stuff. So.
Thank you.
And with that said, this has been KWCE number 27, and we'll see you guys next time for KWCE number 28. Till then, everyone.